Welcome, Dolf.
Thank you, Suresh.
All right, Dolf, what you do sounds very technical and very fascinating. Tell us more about what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. Irena is an international renewable energy agency. We have countries as members, ranging from the size of China to small island nations. And they want to accelerate the deployment of renewables. And innovation and technology is a core part of that. And I think it's also generally recognized that the private sector and entrepreneurship is critical in accelerating that deployment. So climate change is clearly become a top priority in many countries. So we see that more and more countries are subscribing to net zero CO2 emissions by 2050 or 2060. Europe is on this path, and China just announced it last week. And energy transition is really critical to achieve that. And that has a few components. First of all, we need to use energy more efficiently, but also we need to replace polluting fossil energy with clean energy. And we see renewables as a key part of that solution. So according to our scenarios, we need to grow the share of renewables in final energy use from around 20% today to around 67% by 2050. And that has two components. There is the power sector and there is the end-use sector, so building, industry, and transport. So looking at the power sector, we see that renewable power generation is replacing fossil power generation. At the moment, globally, we're at about 28% renewables, and that's rising by about a percentage point a year. And some countries are already much higher. For example, if you look at Europe, so in the year to date, the share of renewables was 41% in electricity generation. Rapid innovation continues in renewable generation. For example, in solar, we see that there's now a trend to perovskite silicon tandem cells with much higher efficiency. We see that wind turbine size continues to increase. We have now wind turbines with blades of more than 100 meters length, which has specific engineering challenges, etc. But the main challenge in power systems transition at the moment is flexibility. So how to integrate high shares of variable solar and wind. And to do that, we need technology, but we also need innovative market design and regulation. We need different types of system operation and new business models. So there's a range of flexibility options. We have identified 30 categories, it's a little bit beyond this intro to go into great detail there, but we see that there's a lot happening in the area of, for example, smart grids. So the role of aggregators that sell energy services, system services based on behind-the-meter batteries or behind-the-meter PV systems. We see the use of smart meters rapidly increasing that provide price signals that reflect scarcity, or peer-to-peer trading. And there's a lot happening in households, but for example, also a different operation of aluminium smelters that is much more flexible. So that is an area of very rapid innovation at the moment, and there we see an important role for startups. Now, the second part of that transition is decarbonizing energy, the end-use sectors, so buildings, industry, and transport, that is just taking shape now. And their electrification with renewables and use of green hydrogen play a key role. At the moment, you see rapid progress in electromobility, for example. This year, around 5% of all cars sold worldwide will be electric. And you see now also increasing attention for what we call hard to decarbonize sectors. So iron and steel, chemical, petrochemical, aviation, shipping, etc. That's sectors where, for example, green hydrogen produced from renewable electricity through water electrolysis is taking shape. Batteries are critical for this overall transition. We see a rapid ramp up of new battery manufacturing capacity. You see also that there is a lot of work on battery chemistry to enhance the performance, and also other forms of electricity storage are progressing. So in summary, we see rapid innovation, but we will need a lot more innovation over the next 10 to 20 years to make this energy transition a success. There's an important role for entrepreneurs in that, and there are important synergies between energy transition and digitalization. That is a sweet spot where we see a lot of innovation happening. Of course, overcoming the valley of death and between proof of concept and widespread deployment is critical, as it is in any innovation area. And we also argue that the COVID recovery packages should be used as an opportunity for this transition, and there should also be an important innovation and invention component in this to support startups to accelerate energy transition. So we need the resources, the capacities of those on this call to make this transition vision into a reality.
Thank you, Dolf. Let me ask you a few questions while we wait for audience questions to come in. My first question for you is, countries like India and Africa are going to need a lot of energy in the next 50 years to pull people out of poverty. And much of this energy is going to come from not clean energy. It's going to come from coal and fossil fuels. How would you, what approach would you advocate for developing countries, especially India and Africa?
Yeah, well, we're not so sure that a lot of that will come from coal. I mean, if you look at the latest India plans, it's very ambitious on renewables. We've done new analysis for the Southern and Eastern African power pools, and we find that the current master plans, it's true, they have like 170 gigawatts of new coal in there, but according to our analysis, it's at the moment, it would be much cheaper and much more economically viable to invest in renewables, because the cost of renewables have come down so dramatically. There is still an issue with that a lot of decision making is based on outdated information. This is a very rapidly innovating sector, and also there is a need to create the right enabling frameworks. So the time of subsidies for coal-based power generation, that should stop.
Okay. We hear a lot, I'm based in Mumbai in India, we hear a lot about solar and wind, apart from the old renewables, of course, hydro. We don't hear enough about hydrogen. What's happening in the world of hydrogen?
So hydrogen, of course, is not a primary energy source. You cannot mine hydrogen. You have to produce hydrogen. And there is a lot of hydrogen production at the moment worldwide, around 130 million tons per year. But that is what we call gray hydrogen, so from coal and gas without CO2 capture. Now, attention is shifting to blue hydrogen, especially natural gas with CO2 capture and storage, and green hydrogen, so from electrolysis. And for example, in Europe now, there are very ambitious plans for green hydrogen. So European Commission announced a plan for 40 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity by 2030 in Europe, and another 40 gigawatts in neighboring countries. Germany wants to install 5 gigawatts by 2030, but by that time import 80% of its hydrogen. So also a lot of attention now for developing trade in green hydrogen from countries with good renewable resources, and related to that issues around standards and certification, that it's really clean and green hydrogen that's being traded. So a very interesting and hot topic at the moment.
All right. We have a question from Manquel. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Manquel. Manquel asks, how do you see energy savings from 3D printing technology, especially in the construction sector?
Well, we need all efficiency that we can get. There is a lot of hidden energy, of sunk energy in building materials. So if new building technologies can help to increase to reduce the consumption of building materials, and that is a very important contribution. If such technology can at the same time help to increase the energy performance of new buildings, that is also very welcome. So in that context, I can see a role perhaps also for 3D printing.
Another question comes from Jürgen Lorenz from the Philippines. He, or I think it's a he, asks why only 67% direct renewable energy could reach more than 80% and together with green hydrogen 100%. He goes on to say that today's available technology is able to do this at a lower cost than proceeding with fossil fuels. So can renewable energies actually compete with fossil fuels in terms of energy density, in terms of calorific value and other parameters, and compete head on?
Again, you have to look a little bit across different applications. So in the power sector, I would agree that we can get the systems with 100% renewables in the next 20, 30 years. In end-use sectors, it depends a little bit. So you have these hard to decarbonize sectors. If you take the example of aviation, so today all aviation fuel is kerosene. It's an oil product. Technically, it's possible to use biofuels, but you would need a lot of biofuels just for the aviation sector. So there you can run into issues. That there is now, so last week there was an announcement from Airbus. They want to develop now hydrogen airplanes. But of course, you need 20 years to develop these airplanes, and then you need another 30 years to replace the whole fleet. So longer term, yes, but till 2050, we really need to speed up if we want to get to these levels.
Dolf, you spoke about the valley of death between proof of concept and commercial application. For entrepreneurs facing the valley of death, what's your advice to them?
Yeah, so in this sector, it's a bit tricky because it's so capital intensive. And that's why I stress the importance of digitalization solutions. Because that is an area where the capital intensity is generally not that high, and it's easier as a newcomer to break into the market. For the more capital intensive investments, innovations, it will be important to identify niche markets. So, and there's then an important role for governments to create these niche markets. Also there is a need to create the right market signals, because if we say that carbon is the main driver, then there should also be a price for carbon. We cannot say we want to decarbonize, but fossil fuels should stay cheap.
All right, final question. I think we have time for one more. Melvin Kizito asks, what is the future of cellulosic ethanol as an alternative to fossil fuel? Will it be viable soon? So
there is a number of plants that produce cellulosic ethanol. The economics are not there. The low oil price we've seen over the last couple of months certainly doesn't help. So biofuels is one of the few forms of renewables that have also really suffered from this COVID crisis. You can use cellulosic ethanol directly in cars, but it can also be a feedstock, for example, for aviation fuel. And there it's important that governments put the right incentives in place for alternative fuels. And a number of countries and regions are moving in this direction. So we think it will grow.
Dolf Gielen, thank you very much for spending time with us. Quite a lot to learn from you. Please enjoy the rest of the Climate Launchpad Global Final.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.